What if I told you the US might already be in a recession, and most people just haven't realized it yet? Not next quarter, not next year, right now. Forget GDP, forget the Fed's pressers. A new algorithm, built using millions of data combinations, just gave a 71% probability that the economy has already turned. In today's deep dive, we're revealing the model, how it works, why it's so powerful, and, most importantly, what it's telling us today. Trust me, you're going to want to watch this one until the end, because missing the signal could cost you more than you think.
Are we in a recession right now? It's the question that weighs on everyone's mind, isn't it?
It really is. It touches everything.
Whether you're a policymaker, steering a national economy, or a business owner making those critical investment decisions, or maybe simply a household trying to navigate your budget.
Yeah, understanding the true state of the economy, well, it can be the difference between proactive planning and, frankly, reactive struggle.
The real-world impact on our finances, our jobs, our collective well-being is just absolutely immense. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So, here's the fundamental challenge we face. The official call on a recession in the U.S., it comes from the National Bureau of Economic Research, the NBER.
The authority, absolutely.
Right, and while they're undeniably the authoritative voice, their announcements, well, they come with a significant delay, sometimes an agonizing one.
Yeah, the paper we're looking at today points out it can be as late as 12 months after a recession has actually started.
12 months. And on average between, 1979 and 2021?
About 7.3 months. 7.3 months. Think about that for a moment. Nearly 3/4 of a year after the economic tide has turned. We're only just getting the official word.
And that kind of lag, well, it's just not practical. Not for policymakers, not for businesses, not for families needing to make timely decisions.
Exactly. But what if? What if we could know in something closer to real time?
That's the dream, right?
What if there was a powerful new lens, to view the economy, allowing us to see these shifts more or less as they happen? Today, we're taking a deep dive into a pretty groundbreaking new paper. It's by Pascal Makayat, just published July 2025.
And it proposes this remarkably insightful method for real-time recession detection.
Using data sources that are maybe unexpected in their simplicity, but profound in their combined power.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is how this paper addresses one of the most persistent and critical challenges in economics.
Yeah.
How do we get that clear, early signal of a downturn?
Before it's too late to really respond meaningfully. Precisely. So our mission today is to pull back the curtain on this innovative approach. We'll explore how this algorithm cuts through the usual economic noise,
right,
offering an accurate, real-time picture of where the economy truly stands, instead of, waiting for that rear-view mirror perspective.
Okay, so how does Makayat get this foresight?
No.
He doesn't look at, complex financial markets or a huge basket of indicators.
No, it's surprisingly focused.
His core insight is elegantly focused. Instead of waiting for the NBER's backward-looking view, this method zeroes in exclusively on the labor market.
Just the labor market.
He leverages two specific data points that, well, it turns out they're incredibly revealing when you look at them together.
Unemployment rates and job vacancies.
That's it, unemployment and vacancies. And if you visualize them during a recession, unemployment typically shoots up sharply, right?
Right, and vacancies.
They decline just as sharply. They often move in this kind of inverse dance.
And that inverse relationship, that's precisely why combining these two data series is so powerful.
Oh.
On their own, yeah, both unemployment and vacancy data can be quite noisy indicators. Lots of short-term fluctuations, up and down.
Right, the monthly jumps can be confusing.
Exactly. But when you put them together, they provide a much less noisy signal of the economy's underlying latent state. It's sort of true hidden health. And this dynamic interaction, it's actually well established in economics. It's often described by the Beveridge curve.
Right, the Beveridge curve, that inverse relationship.
Yeah, it basically illustrates that as unemployment goes up, job openings typically go down and vice versa. Now, there are existing threshold rules like the SAM rule or the Recession rule.
Which we hear about sometimes, triggering when unemployment jumps a certain amount.
Exactly. And they're useful, certainly, but they tend to arbitrarily filter the data or apply these preset fixed rules. Makayat's new method, it aims to extract the most information possible.
So it's optimizing the interpretation, not just setting a fixed bar.
Precisely, getting the most out of that relationship.
And this is where the efficiency and, I guess, the elegance of this approach really shines.
I think so.
Unlike these other complex economic models that might look at, what, 141, 270.
Or even 1,500 different time series.
Yeah. Mikhaila isn't trying to capture every single data point out there. Instead, he's found what he calls the best possible lens through which to look at just these two crucial data streams.
It's about finding that deep predictive power in a focused set of inputs.
Yeah, like having, I don't know, two exceptionally clear binoculars instead of maybe a blurry panoramic view.
It's a good analogy.
All right, let's get into the mechanics then. How does this best possible lens actually work? What's the secret sauce behind this algorithm?
Well, it's not just a simple calculation.
No, it sounds like it's more involved. It's a sophisticated multi-step process designed to build millions of what the paper calls perfect classifiers.
Millions, yeah. It starts with constructing these indicators.
Okay, indicators. What does that mean in practice?
Think of it like meticulously preparing the ingredients. They don't just take the raw unemployment and vacancy numbers off the shelf.
They process them first.
Right. They process the data in many, many different ways. For instance, they smooth it things like 12-month moving averages or exponentially weighted averages.
Okay, to filter out the short-term noise, the blips.
Exactly, to reveal the underlying trends. And they also specifically look for turning points.
Meaning, are we heading up or down consistently?
Yes. They compare current data to the highs and lows observed over various time horizons, sometimes looking back as far as 36 months.
3 years.
And it's not just about the level changes, like the number of unemployed. They're also looking at scaling variations.
So both the absolute change and the percentage change, how big it is proportionally.
Correct. And then they combine these single variable indicators in various ways, sometimes linear combinations, sometimes using min-max rules, kind of like the Meshes rule does with its minimum function.
Okay, so all these different ways of slicing and dicing the data
Result in tens of thousands of these initial potential recession indicators. Each one is looking at the unemployment and vacancy data from a slightly different angle.
tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Okay, so from that huge pool, how do they get to something actually useful for prediction?
Right, that's the next step. That's where the leap to millions of recession classifiers comes in.
Millions. How?
They apply many, many different recession thresholds to those tens of thousands of indicators.
So like for this indicator, signal a recession if it crosses X threshold, and for that indicator if it crosses Y threshold.
Exactly. A threshold could be unemployment rising by a certain percentage or vacancies dropping by a specific number or some combination.
Got it. But the key part seems to be selecting the good ones.
Absolutely crucial, how they select what they call perfect classifiers.
Perfect. That sounds ambitious.
It is. They only keep the classifiers that identify all 15 historical recessions in the 1929-2021 training period without any false positives.
Whoa, okay. Perfect detection for every single past recession in that huge time frame and 0 false alarms.
That's the criterion. 0 false positives. And remarkably, they found more than 2 million such classifiers that meet this incredibly strict test.
2 million perfect ways to call past recessions.
And another key problem this approach solves, quite elegantly, is handling the noise around when recessions end.
Avoiding calling a new recession just because of a temporary blip after one finishes.
Exactly. It actively prevents those blips from being mistakenly counted as new recessions. It ensures a clean, accurate signal on the way in and the way out.
Perfect classifiers still sounds almost too good to be true, though. I mean, are there theoretical limits? Could they misfire in an unpredictable future, even if they are perfect historically?
That's a really fair point. And perfect always refers to that training period, right? The future is always uncertain.
Sure.
The paper implicitly addresses this, though, by how they then select the best ensemble from those 2 million. It's not just about historical perfection anymore. It's about finding robust performance.
Okay, so filtering the 2 million down further?
Yes, and that leads us to the next really clever concept in the paper, the anticipation precision frontier.
Ah, yes, the frontier. Explain that.
Okay, imagine plotting each of those 2 million plus perfect classifiers on a graph.
Okay.
On one axis, you put its mean detection delay. That tells you, on average, how early or late it signals a recession compared to the official NBER date. That's your anticipation.
How early you get the news.
Right. Then, on the other axis, you put the standard deviation of detection delay. That reveals how consistent or precise that signal is.
Does it always signal at roughly the same point relative to the start? Or does it vary a lot between recessions?
Exactly. It does vary wildly. That's your precision. The frontier itself represents the best possible trade-off between these two.
The sweet spot.
Kind of. For any given level of anticipation, say, signaling 2 months after onset, there's no classifier on the frontier that's more precise than the one plotted there. And for any given level of precision, say, a standard deviation of 1 month, there's no classifier that anticipates earlier.
So it maps out the best you can do. It really visualizes that inherent choice a policymaker or anyone faces.
Absolutely. Do you want the earliest possible notice, even if it's, a tiny bit less precise, maybe jumps around a bit more?
Or do you prioritize absolute consistency, rock-solid timing, even if the signal comes a little later?
It beautifully shows that art and science of forecasting.
Okay, so facing that frontier, that trade-off, how did Mikhail choose?
Well, since you can't know any specific policymaker's exact preference for that trade-off, he makes a pragmatic choice. He selects an ensemble, a team, basically of 7 classifiers from this frontier.
7 specific ones. Why 7? And which ones?
They are specifically chosen because they all have a precision below 3 months.
Okay, so pretty consistent. What does precision below 3 months mean practically?
It means their 95% confidence interval for pinpointing the recession's actual start date is less than 1 year wide, which is pretty good.
That sounds quite useful.
This ensemble of 7 then averages their predictions. It gives a consolidated, more robust signal than just relying on one.
Averaging out any individual quirk.
Exactly. And over that long 1929-2021 training period, this ensemble performed exceptionally well.
How well?
It signals recessions 2.2 months after their true onset, on average.
Only 2.2 months lag.
Yeah.
Compared to the NBER's 7.3 months.
Big difference. And the standard deviation of those detection errors was just 1.9 months.
Wow. So very consistent timing, too. That's incredibly accurate for real-time detection.
It really is quite impressive performance on the historical data.
All right, so with all this rigorous development, the careful construction, the testing on historical data, this is the moment of truth.
Okay. What to say now?
What does this oracle of an algorithm say right now based on the very latest data available for the paper, which was May 2025?
Okay, drum roll.
Applying the classifier ensemble to that May 2025 data, the paper delivers a pretty striking finding. The algorithm gives a 71% probability that the U.S. economy is currently in recession.
71%. That's a strong signal. Not ambiguous.
Not ambiguous at all. A significant signal.
Indeed. And it's important to understand this high probability isn't just some random number plucked from the model.
Right. It's driven by the underlying data.
It's driven by very noticeable shifts happening in the labor market itself. The algorithm is picking up on a noticeable decrease in the number of job vacancies.
Fewer job openings.
And an increase in the number of job seekers since the middle of 2022.
More people looking for work.
Yeah.
That classic tightening labor market picture.
Exactly, which is historically very consistent with recessionary conditions. And the paper specifically notes that 5 of the 7 classifiers in that chosen ensemble
5 out of the 7
have been activated in the past 2 years, signaling this significant shift in the underlying labor market dynamics.
So most of the chosen perfect classifiers are saying, yes, conditions look like a recession.
That's what the data is telling them.
Now, I know what some of you listening might be thinking. How can we be sure this isn't just, a clever parlor trick?
Overfitting, right. Did it just memorize the past?
Exactly. That the algorithm hasn't simply memorized past recessions and isn't actually good at predicting new ones or identifying the current state accurately.
A healthy skepticism.
But the paper accounts for this. And the rigorous tests they perform to address this are truly fascinating.
Yeah, they really went the extra mile to validate it. One of the most brilliant tests, and frankly, a bit quirky.
Quirky is good sometimes.
Was this placebo test. They basically asked the algorithm to detect a series of events that are totally random, happen with roughly similar frequency to recessions over the long run, but are utterly disconnected from the U.S. economy.
Okay, what random events did they use?
Get this. The 15 deaths of U.S. First Ladies between 1929 and 2021.
Slight chuckle. Okay, that is unexpected. But random, definitely not economic.
Completely random from an economic cycle perspective. And the results were this stark contrast. While the algorithm identifies actual recessions with that precision of under 2 months, the standard deviation of its detection delays for the First Lady deaths exceeds 40 years.
40 years versus less than 2 months. Yeah, that's night and day. It completely failed to find a pattern there.
Utter failure. And that dramatic failure demonstrates precisely why it works for recessions.
How so?
It confirms that the algorithm is identifying genuine economic signals rather than spuriously fitting the data. It doesn't just find patterns in any old sequence of events.
It's not just finding coincidences.
No, it finds the underlying economic truth because it relies only on those two independent data streams, unemployment and vacancies, which really are linked to economic cycles in a predictable way.
That's a fantastic way to prove it's not just statistical luck. Very clever. Beyond that placebo test, they also did extensive back tests.
Crucial for real-world reliability.
Walk us through what backtesting means for reliability here.
So backtesting means they didn't just train the algorithm on the entire history from 1929 to 2021 all at once.
Okay.
They trained it on limited historical windows of data. For example, maybe using data only up to 1984.
Right, pretending that's all the history they knew.
Exactly. And then they tested its performance on the subsequent out-of-sample recessions, the ones that happened after 1984 in this example, which the algorithm had never seen before during its training phase.
So effectively, they're simulating predicting the future based only on a limited past data set. That sounds like a real test.
It is a much tougher test.
Give us an example. How did it do with something major like the Great Recession using these back tests?
Okay, take the Great Recession detection. Even when the algorithm was trained on data only ending in, say, 1984 or even just 1964.
So decades before it happened.
Decades before. It still detected the Great Recession by mid-2008.
Mid-2008. That's incredibly significant because, as the paper points out, in the summer of 2008, it was not entirely obvious that the recession had already started.
Not at all. Many economists, policymakers, they were still debating it quite actively then. This algorithm, even trained on much older data, picked it up early.
Wow. And what about the current situation? What probabilities did these backtested models give for May 2025?
They varied, as you'd expect, since they were trained on different amounts of history, but they still indicated a strong signal overall.
Like what?
The model trained up to 2004 gave a 58% probability for May 2025. The one trained only to 1984 gave a commanding 83% probability.
83%. That's actually the highest probability mentioned.
It is, interestingly. And even the model trained way back to 1964 gave a 25% probability. Still positive.
So even looking through these older lenses, the signal is still there to varying degrees.
Yes. The algorithm only really started to break down in accuracy when they trained it on a very, very limited data set ending in 1955. Before that, it showed remarkable foresight.
These backtests really are powerful evidence then. It suggests the algorithm is genuinely robust and reliable.
Its performance isn't overly dependent on the specific training period chosen, at least back to the 1960s.
And it finds these patterns consistently over long stretches of time.
Precisely. And maybe even more telling for right now, the fact that all back-tested classifier ensembles give positive recession probabilities in 2025.
Every single one of them, even the old ones.
Reinforces the current high likelihood. It suggests the signal isn't just some fluke of the most recent data. The underlying patterns pointing towards recession now are consistent with patterns seen over decades.
Okay, this paper doesn't just present a new method in isolation, does it? It feels like it implicitly challenges the old guard.
It does somewhat.
The NBER's traditional approach, you mentioned they rely heavily on product market metrics, things like production, sales, consumption.
That's their focus, yes. GDP components, essentially.
And they've explicitly stated in the past that the unemployment rate is lagging and noisy.
Right. They see it as confirming a recession after the fact, not predicting it.
And it's interesting, the paper notes the NBER has actually never mentioned looking at the vacancy rate in their official methodology discussions.
Not vacancy rates, no.
So it's quite a challenge to establish practice, isn't it? It's like trying to convince a seasoned chef to change their signature recipe after decades of success.
It can be hard to shift long-held views based on past success. But Makayat's findings here, they certainly make a compelling case for at least reconsidering the inputs.
So did he directly compare his labor market approach to the NBER's preferred metrics?
He did. Makayat directly addresses this established view. He took his algorithm framework, the whole process of building indicators and classifiers,
Right.
and applied it to a key NBER metric, the Industrial Production Index.
Okay, using their type of data with his method.
Exactly. And then he rigorously compared its performance, its anticipation and precision to his labor market approach using unemployment and vacancies.
And the verdict?
The finding was quite revealing. The combination of unemployment and vacancy rates consistently outperforms industrial production in providing those crucial early and accurate recession signals.
Consistently outperforms. Okay.
And even more surprising, perhaps, he found that even the unemployment rate alone outperforms industrial production on these metrics.
Just unemployment, which the NBER called lagging and noisy, does better than one of their key indicators.
According to this analysis, yes. And if you try to hedge your bets and combine unemployment data with industrial production data,
Thinking maybe the sum is greater than the parts.
right, even that combination does not achieve the same level of anticipation and precision as the unemployment vacancy pairing.
Wow. So that specific duo of unemployment and vacancies seems uniquely powerful.
That's the strong suggestion here, which leads to the paper's conclusion on this point, that official dating practices might benefit from a greater emphasis on unemployment and vacancies.
The data is just more predictive, it seems.
The signals appear earlier and more reliably in this analysis.
Okay, let's bring this all together. So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
The big picture takeaway.
This deep dive has shown you a potentially powerful new way to detect recessions, maybe close to real time, moving far beyond the traditional, significantly delayed methods we usually rely on.
It's a potential shift in how we track the economy's pulse.
And this isn't just some academic exercise, right?
Yeah.
For your decisions, whether you're managing investments, planning for your business, maybe making career choices, or simply trying to understand the economic headlines.
Yeah, for everyday life.
This new lens could offer a powerful advantage, getting that real-time insight or something much closer to it without waiting months for the official retrospective.
Having a better sense of the ground truth sooner.
And the paper, it doesn't just offer a prediction. It concludes with a pretty bold statement based on its findings from May 2025. It says, labor market conditions characteristic of a recession are not on the horizon. They are already here.
A very direct conclusion based on their model's output. It's true. But let's maybe take a moment for one final provocative thought.
Okay, always like those.
What would be the implication if, say, we look back in a year or two and it turns out no official recession actually occurred despite this strong 71% signal? What happens then?
Does that invalidate the whole approach?
Not necessarily. The paper itself actually addresses this crucial self-correction mechanism inherent in the process.
It anticipates being potentially wrong.
Well, it has a plan. If no recession materializes after this period, the algorithm would be retrained using the expanded historical data, which now includes 2022-2025.
Okay.
And crucially, only those classifiers that did not signal a recession during this non-recessionary period would be kept for future use. The ones that gave the false alarm would be discarded.
So it learns from the mistake.
Exactly. And the result would be that the anticipation precision frontier, that optimal trade-off curve, we discussed it, would shift out.
Meaning what, practically?
It would mean that, based on this new, longer history, achieving a certain level of anticipation would likely come at the cost of lower precision, or vice versa. We would essentially learn that detecting recessions with labor market data is harder than the 1929-2021 data suggested if this current prediction doesn't ultimately come to pass.
So it's a continuous learning loop built into the model. It adapts based on new evidence.
Precisely. It refines itself over time.
That's a crucial feedback mechanism to consider, isn't it? It really shows the ongoing evolution of economic understanding and forecasting.
Nothing is ever static in this field.
So whether we are officially in one now or not, understanding these kinds of real-time indicators, this specific approach using unemployment and vacancies, it gives us all a powerful new lens, a new way to look at the economy and maybe make more informed decisions going forward.
More timely information is always valuable.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for diving deep with us today into this fascinating paper.
My pleasure. It's important work.
Keep asking those big questions. Stay curious out there and continue to explore the fascinating world of data and economics with us.
You've just watched an episode of Deep Dive, our AI-powered podcast where two AIs explore the frontiers of finance, economics, and machine learning. If you found insight here, share it. If it helped you think sharper, like it. And if you want more deep technical conversations, subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next drop. It's a podcast on how to apply AI and ML in finance and economics by two AIs, supervised by a senior portfolio manager from top-tier asset managers. Stick around. The future of investing is already speaking. Liked how that paper got decoded? We've spent 20-plus years turning machine learning and AI into real-world tools, not just slide decks. Whether you want to implement a model, validate research, or build something from scratch, we can help. Explore our showcases to see it in action. Visit our site or contact us directly. Let's turn complex ideas into working intelligence together.